that Russian President Vladimir Putin met Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan on the sidelines of the SCO Summit. Putin noted that there are many issues that have accumulated since their last meeting. Let's in fact listen in to the statements that were made by both leaders earlier.
Давно не виделись, накопилось всяких вопросов много, и двусторонних, и региональных, и международных. Надеюсь, что наша сегодняшняя встреча, как это бывает обычно, когда мы встречаемся, будет полезной, содержательной. Рад вас видеть, Николаевич.
Я тоже взаимно. Конечно же, у нас всегда очень насыщенная повестка, и уверен, сегодняшняя тоже. Это очевидно, и я очень рад тому партнерству и диалогу, которое между нами сложилось. И я имею в виду наш личный диалог, и, конечно.
These talks come at a time of strained relations. Armenia's ties with Russia have deteriorated over the past few years after Moscow failed to back Yerevan during the second Nagorno-Karabakh war with Azerbaijan and further diminished trust following the Russia-Ukraine war. In 2023, Armenia in fact refused to return to Moscow for negotiations while the Lachin corridor remained blocked. Today, Armenia is pursuing a more independent foreign policy, freezing its membership in the Russia-led CSTO and taking steps towards formal withdrawal. We did see Nikol Pashinyan at the White House just a few months back. He was there with the Armenian President Ilham Aliyev. Put in quite a spot after, I beg your pardon, Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev. He was put in quite a spot after the Azerbaijani president endorsed Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Trump, of course, and the White House putting it out publicly as well via a tweet later on. Meanwhile, on the ground, we're tracking the latest updates. Xi Jinping has meanwhile concluded his speech. He has stated that China aligns development with SCO and that it should put into use an SCO anti-drug center, set up an SCO development bank as well. That is something that Xi Jinping has also stressed upon. He's put this especially considering the fact that he's trying to promote the Belt and Road Initiative in order to leverage the strength of different markets and improve trade as well. I'd like to rope in Mr. Walter Anderson back into the discussion. We're tracking the latest from the ground. But in the meanwhile, we've seen Armenia and Russia bilateral also take place. So what do you make of this? We've seen ties deteriorate over the last couple of years. Recently, Nikol Pashinyan was in the White House. As I mentioned earlier, he was put in quite a spot as well. Where do you think ties between these two countries are going to be headed next?
Are you talking about between Russia and Azerbaijan?
And Armenia. Armenia.
Yeah. Well, Armenia has tended to look at Russia in the last couple of years as a defensive assistance, not a problem. Particularly because of the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, in which recently Azerbaijan has actually, in a sense, beaten the Armenians and has effectively annexed an area which has an Armenian majority population, though it was not formally recognized as part of that. But this only reflects a major issue in these groups when they get around to strategic issues, and that is the domestic issues. Somebody mentioned the BRI. BRI is a big problem for India because BRI goes through territory which India says is actually Kashmir, Indian Kashmir. And so I totally agree with John, whose point was that there are internal disagreements which are very significant. I think it's going to be very difficult for these countries to move ahead on any kind of strategic cooperation. Economically, they may, but even there's problems. The difference between trade between India and China is $100 billion plus. My wife, who is Indian, is an Indian businesswoman, had tried to export some of her clothing to China, and I know the problems she had in non-tariff barriers in China, which makes it more difficult. And you can talk to many American manufacturers who have tried to get into China as well. So there are those internal problems, but if there's going to be any kind of growth in relationship, it will probably be economics. It will certainly not be strategic.
Speaking of economics, I'd like to rope in Mr. Rosamondo back into the discussion. We had earlier seen Major General Kochhar raise a point of de-dollarization. Yes, there have been efforts that have been made in recent times. We've seen countries trying to trade in their local currencies, but do you think this is really possible? There was an idea that was floated a while back of a BRICS currency, although India in particular seemed hesitant to move in that direction, as it did enjoy a strategic partnership with the United States of America. So will we see this ever catalyzed, because there are reservations and the Trump administration has been very open about this. Trump has posted quite often on against a possible BRICS currency on Truth Social as well.
Well, right now there isn't a serious talk about it. The Brazilian Central Bank issued a report in July in which it said that the BRICS bloc would not have adequate capital, or however you want to put it, until about 2034. So it's still a ways off before they're able to challenge the G7 in terms of economic heft. So in terms of like buying power, the BRICS nations maybe have a slight edge. But right now, in terms of GDP, they lag the G7 and won't be able to challenge the dollar for several years, according to the Brazilians.
Indeed, I'd like to rope in Major General Kochhar into this discussion as well. Even as we are speaking right now, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is addressing the BRICS Leaders Summit. He's speaking to the other leaders, the 24 other leaders that are gathered over there. We're yet to receive an audio source. Once we do get it, we'll head there. But Major General Kochhar, I wanted to ask you, India and China respectively are the fourth largest and the second largest economies in the world. They're now coming together, especially in light of the United States of America slapping steep tariffs against different countries. We are seeing that they're both eyeing greater market access. China especially is eyeing market access into India that was curbed after the Galwan clashes. India is eyeing access to rare earth materials. While things do look to be moving forward on the economic sphere, there are a lot of concerns, especially in the strategic sphere. We've seen a build-up take place recently along the borders. Fresh satellite imagery has in fact come out of the last week or so, showing that China is now upgrading its bases across the border.
You see, China speaks one language, and what we see on the ground is the things and the reality is different. Because I have been onto that side, and I know for sure that the kind of preparations China is making there is preparations for war. Because no country who wants peace is going to start dominating major mountains and features and building up your underground ammunition and missile centers, your helipads and your air bases and your road infrastructure and bridges. So whatever disadvantages China has in terrain, because basically China has a large amount of disadvantage in terrain in that area, in specific areas, I would say that, not in all areas. China is trying to build up its infrastructure there, and today also as we talk, China has more than 60,000 troops in that area, which is against the agreement which has been signed between the two countries in 1996 on confidence building and border management. And Article 1 clearly states that no country will use force against each other or attack each other. And we saw that happening in Galwan, total violation of the treaty. The point here is that China does not adhere to or recognize any bilateral treaties which have been executed between the two countries. So that is one major area of our concern, because when Xi speaks that we are an elephant and a dragon, and and the elephant and dragon must dance, but I think the elephant and dragon are not dancing. They are fighting with each other. So, and because of what happened in 2020 when the status quo was disturbed, why did Xi move his forces there and occupy those areas which were disputed? So we have got these concerns with us, and we have raised these concerns in each and every forum. There is a special representative mechanism now. 24 talks have taken place, and not an inch of progress has been made in 24 talks. See, if two like-minded countries, if China says it wants to resolve the border dispute, and if India is also keen to resolve it, why nothing has moved in all those 24 talks? Because some amount of movement has to be there. We are actually insisting on disengagement, de-escalation, and de-induction. So the first part, disengagement, I will concede has happened since last year's talks. To a very limited extent, the forces have not been reduced, but possibly they have moved back by a couple of kilometers. Now to come back after moving, say, 20, 30, 40 kilometers, China will just take 1 hour to be back, because the kind of infrastructure and roads and all China has, it can move its forces back to from where they have been withdrawn. And as far as India is concerned, the terrain on India's side is not that we don't have that kind of good communication right till our posts. So we are building up upon that, and possibly in a couple of years' time we'll have that kind of infrastructure. But I strongly am of the opinion that in case you want to move ahead with the China, there have to be two things. First is the trust has to be established, and the trust can only be established if there is a movement on the border issue, which I personally feel that after China has enacted those border laws, and if you remember the three warfare strategy of China: legal warfare, psychological warfare, and information warfare. Now, with the legal warfare coming into play, where the border laws are coming into play, I don't think China will vacate those areas. So, if China is not going to vacate it, where do the relations go? A second important aspect, as mentioned by uh, Walter, the trade imbalance, $100 billion, $100 billion, and China will have to increase its import from India if we have to reduce the trade balance. Is China willing to do that? Because China is looking for markets, and it is not wanting to buy, it is wanting to sell. So, in that sort of a scenario, and that is why we were discussing the Belt Road Initiative here, because Belt Road Initiative is a mechanism in which China can push its manufacturing items to a large number of countries. Already, China is exporting to 150 countries, and China has a huge manufacturing capacity. So it wants to utilize this full capacity, and therefore it finds India as the best market to dump. And China is literally dumping into India. That is why this trade imbalance is there. So we would like to uh, request China, or make a bid to China, that we have agriculture products to sell. You should actually buy from us. We have our IT industries, which is also very good. We have our pharmaceuticals, where Russia is where United States is the largest importer of pharmaceuticals from India. Almost 50% of the requirement of the United States for the pharma sector comes from India. So we want China also to do that. So there has to be a reduction in this trade deficit. And if these two things are addressed, then I can say that China intentions are good. But otherwise, if you just talk on only a one-sided affair in which you want everything, but you don't want to give anything. So I think that will be a problem for India in times to come. And my last point is, let us not write off the India and the US relations. They are extremely strong. They've been built over 2 decades. The whims and fancies of one president, I don't think, maybe a temporary kind of a strain is there, but I think in the long run, this friendship is going to last.
Indeed, I'd like to rope in Mr. Anderson once again into the discussion, digressing a little bit away from China, focusing more on Russia, because Putin is also there, and after this leaders summit, we are in fact expecting a bilateral between Putin and Narendra Modi. India's purchase of Russian oil is being penalized. Trump has slapped 50% tariffs, yet India has not bowed down, as experts would say, to pressure that the United States is exerting. In fact, it's continued to buy Russian oil. Recently, the Charge d'Affaires at the Russian embassy in India, Mr. Roman Babushkin, has hinted that a 5% discount might even be put in place for India especially. What are your expectations from this particular bilateral?
Well, in terms of oil, Russia already is selling oil at a discount to India, and I think it's more than 5%. And I just saw a statistic today that over the last year or so, India has saved several $billions because of the discounted oil that they're getting. And one reason that President Trump has reacted the way he did is because these purchases, in a sense, are enabling the Russians to fight in Ukraine. So that's an issue they have. But I wanted to get to another point that the Major General raised, and that is that the border issue is a major issue, probably the major issue between India and China, and that what China needs to do is vacate some of the areas which it occupies. But there's another big issue, and that is the Chinese claim to northeastern India. Arunachal Pradesh is called, if you look at Chinese maps, is called South Tibet. I taught at Tungji University for several years, part-time each year as a visiting scholar from Johns Hopkins University. And I'll never forget the maps we use. I looked at the maps, and they put much of Northeast and all of Arunachal Pradesh as part of China. And that is still the official Chinese position. This area, they say, is Chinese. And that has not changed. And so in some ways, that's probably even more important in terms of the nature of the relationship between India and China than is those areas which the Indian says are being occupied by China, is what does it do about the Chinese claims to northeastern India? And so far, they have not reduced their claims. And I'm sure at this meeting, this issue is not going to come up because everyone knows this is too contentious.
Indeed, even as we're speaking, I'm now learning that